Crossing over the site of the Hetton tunnel and rising up to the sports field, the levelled pit spoil heap brings us to the Hetton Lions Country Park. We are now on the mile-long renowned cycle track, where Hetton Hawks Cycle Club train. Travelling east, we descend the hill to a view of Lions Lake, with its swans and other aquatic birds. At the foot of the hill, we turn right and pass Blossom Pond. From the Blossom Pond at the colliery, up the incline and onto Stevenson Lake, another well-known name in Hetton, with its little landings for anglers to fish from and back out to the colliery lane. The wooded area to the left hides Little Ebbleton Hall. Captain Archibald Cochrane, Royal Navy, lived there. He was an investor in the Hetton Coal Company and had married the daughter of Arthur Mowbray, the manager and driving force behind the company. Now turning right into Hetton Lions Colliery, here was the heart of the colliery, the pit to the right behind a row of colliery houses and the Golden Lion pub. To the left, workshops and offices. The rail line ran down the middle of the road, taking the engines to the massive area central fitting shop on the left, now Lions Gardens, and before that Frankie's Garage. On the 24th of March 1911, George Henry Lawson, under-manager, was knocked over by a fall of stone which buried a miner named Shears. He managed to clear a space around Shears' head, but his foot was trapped. Lawson worked on for 9 hours despite more falls, and Shears was rescued. Lawson was awarded the Edward Medal for his bravery. 162 miners would lose their lives at the pit during its existence. Lions Cottages. As we head past Lions Cottages, the blue plaque on the end of Lions Cottages tells you that the famous George Stephenson designed and laid out the iconic Hetton Colliery Railway, which was built by his brother Robert, who lived in one of the houses in this row. As we head on up Lions Avenue, past Lions Cottages, stands derelict tennis courts, the last remaining sign of the Lions Boys Club and Cricket School. Opened up by the Queen Mother in 1963. It was built out of the old locomotive workshops. The road on the left to the Fir Tree Lane housing estate leads to the hundreds of new houses built in the last decade. The double-fronted terraced houses of Lions Avenue was once the housing for colliery officials. When the new estate was to be built behind the avenue, excavations discovered a Bronze Age site from over 2,000 years BC. Gelt Crescent and Caldew Court opposite were once the Pit Pony Field. Lions Lane. As we race up the hill to Lions Lane, number 2 was the Black Horse pub. The first landlord in 1834 was John Neal. It is thought that Neal Street was named after him. On the right-hand side stood the Lord Seaham, nicknamed the Bat Cave in later years, before it was demolished. It was just above the monument to pigeon fanciers, once a big local activity. At the other side of the junction with the main road stood the Cross House pub. Easington Lane High Street. There was no village of Easington Lane until the opening of the collieries. It was, as the name says, the lane that ran from Hetton to Easington, with hedgerows and the occasional farm. As the pits developed, hundreds of people moved into the area and primitive buildings were built along the lanes and many tradesmen arrived. Tradesmen would establish themselves in the village: Tonks the cabinet makers, Hornsey the watchmaker, the nail factory, Fawcett bootmaker, Logan tailor, Chapman printers, rope makers, doctors, bakers, barbers, butchers, and of course public houses. There were about 14 of those. The Lions Parish Church. St Michael and All Angels Parish Church was opened in 1869. Burials did not at first take place in the churchyard. The first burials were the bodies of the victims of the Elmore Colliery explosion on the 2nd of December 1886. 28 men and boys lost their lives, including father and son George and Robert Thompson. 164 men and boys would lose their lives at Elmore Colliery from 1825 until before it closed in 1974. Easington Lane Workmen's Club. Opened in 1911, it was burnt down in 1939 and rebuilt. There was a time when the League Club had over 150 members and the Jolly Boys would pull in big crowds, with the club giving everyone a Hawksby's pie for free. By 1908-1909, there was Pigeon Fanciers Group with crees for the birds on men's allotments. The longest races could be from France. Birds were clocked using steel identification rings. Tinkertown. At the traffic lights, Pringle's grocery shop stood on the left at the corner of Merton Lane. In a field behind Pringle's was a yard for tinkers and travellers, which became known locally as the Gypsy Yard and throughout the country as Tinkertown. The families would gather from around the country to spend their winters here. They would do whatever was needed from making pots and pans to sharpening knives and scissors. Many moved into permanent residences when the council houses were built in the 1920s. There can still be great gatherings here for the funeral of one of the older members. Brickgarth. The right turn at the lights to the Brickgarth, believed to be so called from the clay pit that existed there in former times. The original tied cottages were built by the Hetton Coal Company for over 200 miners' families. They were damp and often infested with beetles. It was here in the 1832 strike that the families were evicted from their homes by the coal company and their belongings piled up in the street. Some miners were members of Tony Hepburn's First Miners' Union, living side by side with others who were strike breakers. One such man, John Errington, was shot and killed. John Turnbull and George Strong were charged with the murder. They were acquitted due to the lack of witnesses. When strike breakers were brought in from other areas, there were riots with people being shot with marbles and pieces of pewter. For all the early discontent, the community would become remarkably close-knit through time of hardship and celebration. When the roped-off ring went up outside the Nag's Head, it was a sign that there would be a bare fist fight taking place. This cruel sport was condemned by one of the Lions' curates, bringing curses down upon his head. John Gully, one of the shareholders in Hetton Coal Company, became champion of all England when he defeated Bob Gregson in the 36th round of a brutal fight in 1807. Methodism was big and there were 3 chapels here: the Wesleyans 1827, Primitives 1828 and Christian Lear 1881. On the right hand side was the cooperative with departments for groceries, greengroceries, hardware, clothes, butchers, and an annual dividend of approximately 12% was paid to members. The Miners' Welfare was built in 1928 and is now Easington Lane Community Access Point. The Brickgarth has many stories which have been told and written about over the years. The old housing was demolished and replaced by modern council houses in the 1950s. The Memorial Clock. The memorial clock was unveiled by Lord Joycey on the 27th of August 1921. Dedicated to those who fell in both wars, one of the tallest in the country. Lambton and Hetton Coal Company built the tower using stone from Hetton Hall. Clock and inscriptions were paid for by public subscription. The new housing behind replaced what was once the church hall, originally built as a girls' and boys' school in 1859 by the Hetton Coal Company. Elmore Lane leads to Elmore Vale, the site of Elmore Colliery, once a golf course, now closed. Hetley Hill, Elmore Hall, Pittington and onto Durham City. The housing estate to the left are bungalows built in the 1930s as the Prospect Estate, and built in 1953 the Lakes Estate, built in the 1950s. Elmore Colliery opened in 1827 and closed in 1974. The George and Isabella shafts took their names from members of the Baker family from Elmore Hall, who had invested heavily in the Hetton Coal Company. One of the stipulations was that the mine would be kept well away from their estate. The investment was much opposed by Lord Londonderry, who made sure that his pit at Pittington would be seen from their manor. Annabel Milbank was born at Elmore Hall. Although her family were from Seaham, she was later to become the wife of Lord Byron in 1815. They would separate after their child Ada was born. After marriage, Ada would become Ada Lovelace. Close friends with inventor Charles Babbage, Ada is widely held to have been the first computer programmer. There is an Ada Lovelace Day which aims to raise the profile of women in science. The Free Gardener's Arms. The Free Gardener's Arms has been many things over the years and is currently a restaurant. It was Easington Lane's oldest public house, built in 1825. The Tudor fronting was much later, 1928. It was always known as the Long Pull, as it was a long pull up the hill away from the 4-lane ends. It was a popular watering hole for many horse owners who would frequent the blacksmiths and call in for a pint or three. In the early days, a theatre was built above the stables in the backyard. It was called Thompson's Music Hall and held about 100 people. The local blacksmiths was on the north side of the inn. This was Loudon's Blacksmiths, established 1856. Blacksmith Vic Marwood would boast that he was so skillful he could make a set of iron shoes for a flea. Maybe a pint too many? The Cosy Cinema. The Cosy Cinema stood on the corner next to Clish's newsagents. It was built in 1938 and was the area's third cinema, fourth if we include the Star Electric. It stopped showing films in the late 1950s and converted to a bingo hall. Finally closed in 1995. Forest Estate stood behind the Cosy, being built in the 1920s, now demolished. It is a site of Easington Lane Primary School. The Commercial Hotel was on the south side, built in the 1840s as the Joiners Arms, a popular place with local farmers. The 3 tons at the top of the hill on the same side would be known as the Top House and was famous for its handball and darts teams. Mixed Primary and Secondary School. At the top of the bank on the right, the mixed primary and secondary schools were opened by Tom Cleach in 1928. In the early years, some of the children were issued with vouchers as many were absent because they had no boots. Some were given extra food as they were suffering from malnutrition. Now demolished, additional new houses are under construction. Before the school, it was the site of the reservoir of Easington Lane, and Hetton Water Company opened in 1892. Gargill's Farm was located where the Cotherston Estate is. Was a very old farm. It was there before Easington Lane Township came into existence.